All right, Mayor Pro Tem, I believe we are streaming and ready to go.
All right, thank you very much. I am Mayor Pro Tem Aren Rodriguez. Mayor Bagley is not available tonight, and so I will be chairing the meeting. At this time, I would now like to call the May 4th, 2021 Longmont City Council study session to order. Could we please start with the roll call?
Yes. Mayor Bagley. Councilmember Christensen.
Here.
Councilmember Martin. Councilmember Martin.
Here. My space bar is malfunctioning again.
No worries. Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring.
Here.
Councilmember Peck.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Waters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Just a reminder to the public that meetings are being held remotely due to the ongoing novel coronavirus pandemic. You are able to watch these on the City of Longmont website, the City of Longmont's YouTube channel, as well as Longmont Public Media. As a reminder, as tonight is a study session, there will only be one public invited to be heard at the beginning of the meeting. As you can see now on your screen, the information is available to call in, the number being 1-888-788-0099. Please enter the meeting ID 817-1468-1493. When asked for participant ID, press the pound sign or the number sign. One more time, tonight will be the first call will be the only chance for public invited to be heard. Dial toll free at 1-888-788-0099, meeting ID 817-1468-1493. When asked for the participant ID, press the pound sign or the number sign. These instructions will be put up at the appropriate time when we will be doing public invited to be heard. At this time, I will go ahead and lead the Pledge of Allegiance. When everyone is ready. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. At this time, I will take motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to the future agenda. Any council members wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to public invited to be heard. There will be a 3-minute limitation per speaker. We will hold or take a break for the next 5 minutes to allow folks to call in. The meeting prompt screen is now displayed for you, so please call in at the numbers previously stated and on display on your screen. Thank you.
Once again, folks, if you're joining us tonight for public invited to be heard, now is the time to call in. Please dial 1-888-788-0099 and enter the meeting ID on the screen. Please remember to mute the live stream when you call and listen to further instructions on your telephone. We will call you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number, at which time you'll state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes for public invited to be heard. We'll leave this up for just a few minutes longer. Just a reminder that now is the time to call in for public invited to be heard. Please dial the toll-free number on your screen, 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 817-1468-1493 and press the pound or number sign. Please remember to mute the live stream when you call in and listen to the instructions on your telephone. We'll call you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number, and you can state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you very much.
Fine for you, I just want to clarify. Enemies, a-rolls proper they are.
All right, it's been about 5 minutes. How many callers do we have?
Mayor Pro Tem, we have 1 caller currently.
All right, let's get to that caller.
All right. Caller ending in 949. 949, you should be able to unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. The Associated Press recently published a story about a possible water shortage on the Colorado River. The article is titled, U.S. West Prepares for Possible First Water Shortage Declaration. The Bureau of Reclamation predicts the water level in Lake Mead will fall below the 1,075-foot mark in June. And if it remains at this low level in August, the Bureau will declare a level 1 shortage or a call on the Colorado River, resulting in cuts starting in January 2022. It should be no surprise to Council that the Colorado River is in dire straits. Longmont residents have already told you about the river situation. Scientists warn of a warming climate where drought is the new normal in the West. We are trending towards permanent drought, which will bring lower water levels to our rivers, streams, and creeks. We should be focusing on how to take care we should be focusing on taking less from our waterways, not building water storage to get more. So what can the city do? Offer more robust water conservation incentives to residents, like a rebate program to replace thirsty bluegrass lawn with a landscape that requires less water. I know from experience that changing one's landscape to a less water demanding one requires a lot of hard labor, a long-term commitment to see the fruits of one's labor, and requires lots of money for plants and soil amendments. The city should offer a rebate program for per square foot of bluegrass lawn removed to help residents make the transition. The Garden in the Box program is a good thing, but the city needs to do more. Longmont is always ready and willing to provide millions in financial incentives to Costco, Smuckers, and that pharmaceutical company that is closing up shop after a short stint in Longmont. Council should support landscaping rebates to residents. You can also increase the cash in lieu of water rights to accurately reflect the real cost of adding to our water supply. The current rate at $17,693 per acre foot isn't enough. At this low rate, residents are subsidizing developers. Finally, limit development in Longmont. Put a cap on our population growth. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ruby. Are there any other callers?
No, Mayor Pro Tem, there are not.
All right, thank you very much. As such, we will move on to agenda item 5A, COVID-19 update by city manager. Harold?
Mayor, Council, as I talked to you all before, where we're moving is really just going to be dependent on the hospitalization piece and where we sit as a county. And so I talked to you about this report being much more abbreviated compared to what we did. So again, you can see where we are as the metro area in terms of hospitalizations. I'm going to show you the graph that we have in terms of Boulder County. So again, seeing that difference. Before I've normally said Broomfield's going to be on the other side of this. You can see that they're going through an increase in this. And you can see that Denver's obviously right on the trend. And Arapahoe is up. Adams is up. Douglas is there, and then Jefferson County is there. So when you look at all of the counties and where we sit today in terms of the hospitalizations, we're still doing well and not moving up on this trend. And where we're looking at the blue line, what I wanted to say is we're also continuing to make progress on the vaccinations and getting more and more people vaccinated. As we continue to move forward, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to encourage folks to get vaccinated. What we're seeing in all of the data now is how important that really is in order to really continue to get ahead of this. And so we're just going to continue pushing that. We're continuing to work a lot of different clinics that are coming out. The one thing is they're getting ready to shift some times on some of the clinics because what they found is the 8 to 5, 8 to 4 timeframe is not as conducive for some people to come in. And so they're going to shift those to later hours. And I know that's going to be coming in the near future. So I just wanted to let you know we're still there. The state did reissue some masking orders. We're trying to figure it out. It is somewhat of an interesting dynamic about what that means to people. And we're trying to wrap our arms around what does that really mean in certain situations, because there's things like, well, if you have X number of people and 80% of the people are vaccinated, then you don't have to wear a mask. And so we're trying to move through it. I know that the county's trying to align with the metro area and some of the other masking requirements, and hopefully we'll be seeing that in the very near future. So I'll probably have more information for you next week as we understand this new level of movement. The big day for everybody on this is really going to be that May 16th timeline when it's projected to move into level clear, and we'll talk to you all about that. I'd be happy to answer any questions you all have that may have come up from your constituents or any information that you want me to cover.
I do not see any questions from the council at this point, so I'll just ask real quickly. Because of the masking orders that were stated, I do have a quick question about, does anybody understand how we can ask this question without it being a HIPAA violation?
Meaning, ask the question if you've been vaccinated?
That is correct.
So it's a little bit different, and it applies, it's a different application to different areas. So they actually did clear and give employers the ability to ask I'm going to ask Eugene to jump in and make sure I'm saying this correctly. They did clear it for employers to ask employees if you've been vaccinated. But it is different in that, because we've had questions, well, can you ask volunteers? And the answer is, well, no, because that hasn't been cleared. And so that world is as murky as the other worlds outside of the employer-employee relationship. But you have to be very careful in that world still. And so, it's going to be interesting because the more nuanced these are, how do you know? And that's the question, is how do you know? Which then really makes you go to, you have to assume that people aren't, where you can't ask. Eugene, did I get the employer-employee relationship right?
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. I'd agree with you, Harold. I do think that the legal parameters are murky, but probably even more impactful, though, are the sort of policy questions about potential discrimination based on vaccination status, wrapped up into the conversations about vaccine passports. And I think that, optimistically, there'll be more clarity on that as we get more people vaccinated and as we move into level clear, where we are expecting, bigger crowds and gatherings, and where it will be more important. So I think it's an evolving issue right now, real time.
And to add to your question, I think what you're seeing from the CDC is they've talked about creating more of an incentive-based approach as to how do you reward people who've been vaccinated? And I think that's what we see people trying to do, but it becomes very complicated as they try to do that in the issues with the concept of vaccine passports and what that looks like. So hopefully we'll see some more progress on it.
Okay, thank you. And then one second question is that slide that you shows the Denver metro counties, if you will, but doesn't give us Weld County. Can you give us any kind of information about Weld County and where their numbers are?
Not at this point. When you look at what we're doing with the metro region, you can get pretty granular on vaccinations. I can look that up and get it to you.
Okay.
And I don't want to risk what I heard late last week and whether or not that's still the case today, but we can look that up and give it to you, because I know it was one of the two, Larimer or Weld, was having some issues, but I don't know which. And so we'll provide that information to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that it for this report, Harold?
Yes, sir.
All righty, very good. Then we shall move on to item 5B, a proclamation designating the month of May 2021 as Archaeological and Historic Preservation Month in Longmont, Colorado. Give me just 1 second to pull up that proclamation. All righty, here we go. A proclamation designating the month of May 2021 as Archaeological and Historic Preservation Month in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, encouraging economic growth, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas archaeological and historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history and archaeology in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas the Historic Preservation Commission supports Archaeological and Historic Preservation Month in Longmont for May 2021. Now, therefore, I, Aren Rodriguez, Mayor Pro Tem, on behalf of Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in him and me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim May 2021 as Archaeological and Historic Preservation Month in Longmont, and call upon the residents of our community to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. Do we have any members of Historic Preservation? I see Planner Kruger to accept the proclamation.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, thank you so much for acknowledging the importance of preservation in our community. As you know, it's Longmont's 150th birthday, so this is especially timely. I'd also like to thank our Historic Preservation Commission, our very active neighborhood groups, city staff, and residents, of course, for continuing to protect and promote our historic assets. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Planner Kruger. At this time, we'll move on to item 5C, the Longmont Economic Development Partnership Quarterly Report, first quarter for 2021. I'd like to welcome Assistant City Manager Jody Marsh and I believe, Executive Director of the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, Jessica Erickson, or CEO, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez and City Council members. I do have slides. Oh, there you go. Thank you. All right, thank you. So as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, this is our first quarter report to council. I'll have you go to the next slide. And because this is our first time seeing you this year, I just wanted to remind you of the deliverables of our 2021 contract, which includes strengthening Longmont's competitive position through implementation of Advanced Longmont 2.0, marketing our community nationally as a premier location for industry and talent, supporting the creation and retention of quality jobs, specifically pursuing a strategy of targeting specific industry clusters, advancing opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation, and advocating on behalf of all Longmont businesses. Next slide. And within our contract, we have specific objectives related to the Advanced Longmont 2.0 focus areas of talent, industry, and impact, which is what I'll be speaking to this evening. Next slide. So we'll start with our talent objectives. The first objective is being to recruit and retain new needed talent. Next slide. And so we continue, oh, sorry. That's fine. You can go to the next one. We continue our work with Avocet Communications on the National Talent Attraction marketing campaign that we've presented to you previously. We'll just remind you that we launched that campaign in July of 2020. And the first kind of phase of that campaign was a test, learn, refine, and really an awareness campaign. We've now kind of stopped as of April to refresh our creative and refresh our messaging, especially in the wake of COVID-19, understanding that talent generally has more options now in where they locate because of the commonality of remote working. And we also know from talking to employers as well as conversations with our workforce that people are using different factors to make decisions in terms of where they live and work. And so we'll be updating that campaign with an intended relaunch in July of this year. Next slide. So the next steps for us, I'll remind you that this campaign is entirely funded by our private sector Aspire Leadership Council. So we will be bringing the campaign, updated campaign to them for their feedback. We also will be launching our 2021 Workforce Perception Study, which informs the campaign, and I'll be talking about in more detail momentarily. We'll do the redesign work as well as a new assessment of our target markets to ensure we're reaching the right audiences, the cities, the industries, and the job titles that offer the most promise for Longmont in terms of talent attraction. And again, I mentioned we'll relaunch in July 2021. Next slide. The Workforce Perception Study, I'll just mention, I'll remind you, our 2020 Workforce Perception Study was the first of its kind for Longmont, and it was really an assessment based on responses from local workforce. So working with our primary industry employers to survey their workforce to identify those factors that matter most to them and where they choose to live and work, and how they rank Longmont relative to those factors. So I think it would come to no surprise that of great importance include housing cost of living, and housing availability. And those are areas that Longmont is challenged with, as is the region at large. Whereas a safe community, food and drink options, outdoor recreation, and our schools are also of high importance, and where Longmont ranked very well in 2020. Next slide. So those were the lifestyle factors that we looked at. We also look at career factors. So identifying which career factors are of greatest importance and how Longmont ranks relative to those career factors. And we found that work-life balance and career advancement were highly ranked, and places that are of great importance to our workforce, as well as places that Longmont ranked very highly. Next slide. And so for 2021, actually are launching the study this week, the week of May 3rd. We are adding an optional section to assess demographics. We want to make sure that we're being as equitable as possible in assessing our workforce perceptions of Longmont, as well as offering an opportunity and incentive to sign up to participate in the updated campaign, sneak peek, the See Yourself in Longmont campaign. So we'll have some more detail on that with the campaign relaunch in July. Next slide. So our second talent objective is industry and future responsive talent infrastructure. So creating and facilitating opportunities to connect Longmont EDP industry partners with education and workforce development partners. Next slide. Relative to that, we launched our 2021 Elevate Longmont Primary Industry Survey in January, which wrapped up on April 30th. I don't know why that says 20th, but April 30th. And so we'll have our State of Industry report that comes out of that in later this quarter. We've included information about our local and regional education and training systems in 12 different primary industry and expansion and attraction proposals, and directly referred 8 companies to those partners. Next slide. Our industry objectives first is primary industry expansion and attraction. Next slide. So as of the end of March of this year, so the end of Q1, we had 16 active primary industry prospects in our pipeline that equate to 3,930 jobs with an average wage of $69,000 per year and a potential for $1.2 billion in capital investment. You see on the right the breakdown of targeted industries that those prospects are in. You'll also see that there is a 25% outdoor recreation, which isn't one of our targeted industries, but we've had a number of prospects in the outdoor recreation space. So we're watching that closely as a potential for future growth in Longmont and future opportunity for Longmont. Next slide. And then when we look at the job creation potential by industry relative to those prospects, knowledge creation and deployment, which is our R&D type activity, has the highest number of potential job creation. It's also the highest wage paying of the industry clusters. Next slide. Our second objective is in primary industry retention. I'll remind you that we always work to retain 100% of our existing primary employers. However, we don't control all things, but it's certainly our effort to retain as many of our existing primary employers and jobs as possible and as we have the ability to influence. Next slide. And so part of that is our Elevate Longmont survey, which I mentioned earlier. This year, we've gone to an 100% online short form survey. I remind you that historically we go out to each individual business and conduct that survey. COVID-19 restrictions prevented us from doing that. So we pivoted to an online process. As of the end of Q1, we had 30 responses, and we're hoping to have at least 40 responses, or we had hoped to have at least 40 responses, which we did achieve as of April 30th. And again, that will inform the annual State of Industry report that will come out in Q2 or later this quarter. Next slide. And our third industry objective is entrepreneurial development. So developing an ecosystem in Longmont that fosters entrepreneurship and innovation. Next slide. And so we're really focused on two things, funding and support for Innovate Longmont, Longmont's Entrepreneurial Hub and Accelerator program. The Innovate Longmont folks are working on developing curriculum for their next cohort, which will start in the fall of this year. In the meantime, they are also working with St. Vrain Valley School District on a student entrepreneurship program that will run over the summer. We also, as part of the Advanced Longmont 2.0 priority of creating a no wrong door ecosystem for our entrepreneurs in Longmont, we've engaged startup spaces, which their objective is literally to work with us to create an online platform that creates a no wrong door ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And what that means is that regardless of which entrepreneurial support organization or partner organization an entrepreneur might start with. They're going to get access to the same resources, information, and we'll also be able to track better on the back end what that impact is, what resources are being most used, what resources might need to be added, changed, or improved in order to best support our entrepreneurs here in Longmont. Next slide. And then our first impact objective is to transform our Advanced Longmont partners into a world-class collective impact group. Next slide, sorry. Oh, can you try clicking that one more? Hopefully okay, oh, there it goes. So that's not exactly what it's supposed to look like, but I just wanted to remind you all of that collective impact framework under which we're implementing Advanced Longmont 2.0, which really considers our Advanced Longmont partner organizations as the steering committee, really guiding the strategy. And then we have active working groups engaged in pursuing strategic initiatives around 4 of our focus areas: talent, place, industry, and connectivity. Next slide. Oh, there it goes. You can go to the next slide. And so currently we have 15 active Advanced Longmont 2.0 strategic initiatives underway, 6 of those in our talent focus area, 2 in industry, 3 in place, and 4 in connectivity. We are working on the development of a shared data dashboard relative to all of our strategic initiatives and focus areas that we expect to launch before the end of this year. Next slide. And our second impact objective is collective problem solving, which is really about engaging the private sector to support our ability to solve problems together as a community. And that is through our Aspire Leadership Council, which we hope to grow this year with members representing a cross-section of private sector expertise to drive collective problem solving by providing leadership, expertise to inform policy, strategy, and decision-making in Longmont. Next slide. And so the Aspire Leadership Council furthers the goals of Advanced Longmont 2.0 by bringing private sector leadership, know-how, and resources together to influence outcomes that will bolster our economic future. It's led by private sector leaders invested in guiding transformational change that makes our community more competitive, inclusive, and economically resilient. Next slide. And just a quick overview of the organizations that are represented as part of that leadership council. You'll see it's anywhere from primary industry employers to financiers, developers, and our hospitals. Next slide. And so, oh, well, we can go there. That's fine. And so we most recently, the Aspire Leadership Council most recently met and approved funding for a continuation of the real estate market assessment project that we partnered with the Downtown Development Authority on last year. And so out of that came what we've called a technical management plan, or a variety of strategies that we can pursue to both take advantage of the opportunities that the real estate market assessment uncovered, as well as address some of the challenges it uncovered. And so we're going to re-engage Civic strategy and development to do an inventory and analysis of abandoned real estate projects over the last couple of years, really just to answer the question of why were they abandoned and what was the impact. And then do a comparative analysis of the project entitlement process. So take 4 recently completed or under construction projects and compare the process here in Longmont to competitive communities. And then host developer and builder strategy sessions to help better understand how we can really what we can improve, certainly, but what we're doing well from the development perspective or developer and builder perspective, what we're doing well and should continue to do, what we're maybe not doing so well and can improve, what we should stop doing, and what we're maybe not doing that we should start doing from a process perspective to better align that process with the visions of the vision of the City Council, Envision Longmont, Advanced Longmont 2.0, and other strategies for the future of Longmont. Next slide. And then I'll give a broad economic overview. Next slide. So unfortunately, as you're all aware, Novartis Gene Therapies did announce the closing of their Longmont facility, which will be a 929,000 square foot campus and impacting 400 plus jobs. We have had a great deal of activity and interest on that site, both from a real estate perspective. We've also had a great deal of activity and interest and a number of conversations with area companies interested in absorbing the talent. And so our hope is that this will be as minimally impactful from a talent perspective. Number one is that's our first priority, and that the timeline from when that facility is or that campus is vacated to when it's backfilled with a new user will be as short as possible. And then again, since this is the first time that we're seeing you this year, just a recap of how our industry clusters performed in 2020 in a challenging environment. Our knowledge creation and deployment cluster was our best performing cluster with 2.2% growth and 3.8% projected growth this year. And that is better than both the state or better than the national comparison for both last year's growth and projected growth for this year. Our business catalyst cluster also performed well, 1.4% growth and projected to continue to grow in 2021. Smart manufacturing did not perform as well with actual 2.2% job losses, but we are projecting to we are projecting that we'll get close to recouping those jobs in 2021. Food and beverage fared the worst of our targeted clusters, which I think would come as no surprise to anyone, with 7.8% job losses, though we do project to start to see some of that come back in 2021. I want to mention too that this is this is based on economic modeling systems, the data source that we use, and it doesn't take into consideration new entrants to the market. So all of those prospects that I showed you in my earlier slide have the potential to improve these projections relative to job growth, though those jobs won't likely be created in 2021, depending on the size and scope of the project. So I'll use the example of Smucker's. They announced in 2017, but didn't create a job until 2019. Next slide. And then if we look at all of our targeted industry clusters as a whole, they collectively saw 0.2% job growth and are projected to grow by nearly 2% in 2021. If we look at all industries, not just our targeted industry clusters, we did see overall job growth in 2020 of 1.8%, and that's projected to all industries are projected to grow by another 2.1% in 2021. Bureau of Labor Statistics preliminary estimates of Longmont unemployment rate as of February 2021, which is the most recent data available at the local level, is 6.9%, which is compared to 2.8% just 1 year earlier, but also a high of 10.7% in April 2020 at the height of job losses related to the pandemic. Colorado's unemployment rate in February sat at 6.8% and the national was 6.2%. So we're pretty close in line with both national and state unemployment. Next slide. And then commercial real estate market trends. I'll talk about available and vacant space as well as absorption. And these are Q4 numbers from 2020. So we had a total available of 918,000 square feet of industrial space. Total vacant is 747,810. The difference between the two is that available is listed space and vacant only includes listed space that's currently vacant. So you could have space that's occupied that's listed because a lease is coming to an end, or like the current building, the GE current building, they still technically occupy the space even though the space is available. So we did see positive absorption of just over 44,000 square feet in Q4. Next slide. And then when we look at the office market, which we have a relatively small office market, I think we've talked about that in the past, but it totals 1.5 million square feet, 9.6% vacant, and again, positive net absorption in the office market in Q4. I expect that might not be the case long-term as things start to shift in the office market, though again, with such a small office market, we may not see all of the impacts that other places like central business districts and downtown Denver and places like that are experiencing. I believe that's all I have. Yep, that's all I have as far as presentation goes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, okay, Councilmember Waters.
Yeah, if nobody else is going to have, I was going to wait, but if there are other questions, I have several. Can I just kind of run my questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jessica, first of all, thanks for a great presentation. I think back on my first council meeting, you were doing a quarterly report and I was probably harder on you than I should have been. I meant to be not on you, but on the report. And I just think where you've come with this is you ought to be proud of it. I'm proud of the work you're doing. I appreciate it as a council member. So with that, the first table or first matrix that you put up was a reflection of your perception survey.
Yes.
And on one axis, nearly 100% in terms of importance was housing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the bottom, right, in terms of availability was housing, right? And that, if I read that properly.
Yes.
And you made the comment that we have a lot of work to do in this area.
Yes.
And my assumption is we're talking about attainable housing. This would be non-subsidized, right? Since we have an agenda item coming right up where we're going to talk about our inclusionary housing ordinance, and we'll talk about the goals we have set there. Off the top of your head, based on the data you've collected, do you have even a rough approximation of what percentage of our housing inventory should be available in this market as attainable, right? Given the fact that that number I know is fluid, like, what are the earnings and the costs, and we're going to come back to that, not tonight, but I suspect soon with our housing ordinance. But it would be helpful before we get into that conversation from an economic development perspective to have an idea of what's it going to take for that rating in terms of importance to also move horizontally, right? So to reflect the progress we've made in terms of inventory and availability of attainable housing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we would consider that what you're talking about as workforce attainable housing. Yes, I do recognize that those earning 50% and below are part of the workforce. But when we look at our primary industry base, the largest percentage of the workforce in our primary industry base is earning between 80 to 120% AMI. And so attainability for that workforce is critical to our ability to continue to attract investment, because investment or businesses, industry goes where talent goes. And so if we don't have the ability to house talent in a way that's affordable and attainable to those folks, we don't have the ability to continue to attract and grow industry. And so this city has a noble goal of 12% affordable housing. It's our belief, my belief personally, that the other 88% should be attainable to our workforce, recognizing that's not likely, it doesn't exist today, but I do think that it should be an area of focus for a variety of reasons. One, to ensure upward mobility of all of our workforce, as well as, again, our ability to continue to retain and grow our primary industry base. And I think what our community looks like 50 years from now is not going to be dependent on, I guess I'll say it'll be partially dependent on our ability to achieve that 12% goal. But I think it'll be more dependent on how that other 88% shapes out.
So when we're going to get into that conversation in just a bit, so maybe we'll have a chance tonight as a council to talk about what kind of a goal that we might want to set for attainable housing. A couple of more questions. Do you have any idea off the top of your head, because you're doing under the Civistruct strategy and development, work. You're looking at case studies, trying to learn from what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Do you have off the top of your head just a general idea of the number of applications that we've seen from developers / home builders interested in taking advantage of our mid-tier exceptions that we created as an option with our inclusionary housing ordinance?
Thank you for the question, Councilman Waters. So I wouldn't have the number of applications. There's likely somebody on this meeting that would have an understanding of the actual number of applications that have come to the city. I can tell you that we've had many conversations with developers and builders that are considering pursuing application to develop that type of housing in Longmont. And between the fact that some of the code updates that need to happen in order to make that type of development viable have not yet happened, as well as some of the process challenges that have been faced. And then certainly, I think it's no secret that we were supportive of metro districts as a tool to support attainable workforce housing. So after looking at many of those factors, we are aware that there are a number of developers that have chosen to not pursue development or had projects at some point at some place in the process that have chosen to or elected to abandon those projects. And that's what we'll be assessing, is how many of those projects have been abandoned, at what stage in the process, and why, so that we can better understand that. And it may not all be because of, Longmont process issues or code issues, but we want to understand where that is a challenge, why. So if there is a desire to pursue that type of development and incentivize that development, we have the answer as to how we might do that, or how we might do that better than what we're doing today.
So without naming projects or applicants or developers, or even mechanisms or strategies for financing, and regardless of the costs, is it safe to say, I'm thinking of one specific project that was initially submitted as attainable housing for purchase, attainable housing. It has been long enough in our process that no longer, as costs have gone up, no longer can that builder deliver the product as for sale attainable housing at this point in time, because of the cost, for whatever reasons, because of the cost of money over a 3-year period of time that it's been in the review process. Is that an accurate or fair statement?
That would be one example of an experience that's been had, and certainly one of the projects that we'll be looking at to understand why the process on both sides has taken 3 years. And certainly market conditions have created an environment that makes it more challenging to build the product they originally intended to build. But had they been able to build it a year ago, would not be experiencing the market conditions, specifically the cost of construction materials that developers and builders are experiencing today. So there's certainly the cost of time, so the financial cost of the time that it takes to get through the process, but then there's also changing market conditions and the uncertainty of changing market conditions, that if the timeline were able to be compressed, can be projected better and potentially result in not having to change strategy or business plan as a result of them.
But this will be my last question. I want to come back to that when we get into our next item, but just one last question for you, Jessica. You led your presentation with the deliverables that are in your contract that you promised to the city. As an addenda to that contract is a list of 8 deliverables that the city is obligated to deliver to you. At least 3 of those, deliverables 4, 5, and 6, it seems to me your ability to complete the work that you've laid out with the Civistruct strategy and development work, right, to do that analysis really depends heavily on how well the city delivers on deliverables or performs on deliverables 4, 5, and 6. Is that a fair statement? And I'm not trying to, I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I'm not trying to throw the city under the bus. I think we need to be really clear on if this is going to work, what we owe as our performance on deliverables to you, given the expectations we've set for LDDP, and the data you've shared and the progress you've made. And the housing is a big piece of that in terms of talent recruitment and the kind of economic development that lifts all boats, right? I mean, it's not growth for growth's sake. It's growth because of the nature of the jobs we want to create, the compensation that goes with those, and the quality of life that could be associated with that level of compensation. And I just think we ought to be as clear in what we owe you and our performance on it as we expect you to be on what you're delivering to us. So that's a conversation for us to continue to have, I think, as council and city staff, and Harold's going to weigh in. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No, I'm not going to wait. This is actually for Erica.
Jessica?
We had a council member drop off, Erica.
I've unlocked it so she can come in.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to wait till, the dialogue had, settled a bit before I asked if anybody had heard from Councilmember Martin. And so I'm saying no.
And
So
if I may respond to.
Sure. Go ahead and respond to Councilmember Waters.
And thank you again, Councilman Waters. So what I'll say relative to that, so I'm going to say a couple of things relative to that. So that addendum that we have to the contract that provides an outline for what we need in addition to the financial support from the city in order for us to be successful is unique to any economic development contract that I've ever seen or been part of, and much appreciated, because we can't be successful without having that relationship with the city. And it has been, for the most part, positive, but we always have room to improve, right? So I think there are probably opportunities, especially now that we have the private sector so engaged from a primary employer perspective, from a developer perspective, builder perspective, financier perspective, legal perspective, to have access to all of those resources and expertise. I think we as Longmont EDP and the city by extension would be doing itself a disservice to not take advantage of an engaged and active and invested private sector that really has the same vision for our community that we've stated through our various strategy and planning documents. So I think the more that we can have those conversations, encourage those conversations, and the more that we are welcomed, we being myself and my leadership, my private sector leadership, and investors, the more that we are welcome to the table to have those conversations, I think the better off the city will be in terms of some of the challenges that we face going forward.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Peck. And then welcome back, Councilmember Martin. If you do have a question, you could be next, but I haven't seen any other hands at this point, so.
Didn't have any questions. I missed almost the whole presentation being locked out.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Jessica. I do have a couple of questions. On Novartis, you said there were 400 jobs lost. Are all of those jobs from this campus?
Thank you for the question, Councilwoman Peck. Yes, there were just over 400 people employed at the Novartis Longmont campus. We do know that a small percentage will be given the opportunity to relocate to another Novartis facility. A small percentage will be given the opportunity to continue to work for Novartis from anywhere, but we assume from Colorado remotely, and then the remainder will be displaced. We have connected Novartis and their local human resources leadership with workforce development, and they're working on a variety of creative ways to connect those displaced employees with opportunities in the region. We've also directly reached out to employers and the other employers, both locally in Longmont and in the region, and had conversations with them about absorbing some of that talent. So I don't want to suggest that this isn't bad news, but I do want to say that because of the relationship that we had with Novartis, we were able to be one of the first to know that this was happening and very quickly go into rapid response mode, as I mentioned, to number one, prioritize connecting displaced workers with opportunities, and number two, prioritize the ability to backfill that real estate as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. And I do have a comment about the discussion that you and Councilman Waters just had. I think in these discussions, we cannot disregard the input from our planning and zoning department, because many of these lags in construction on development have to do on the developer's part as well. I mean, I've been talking to especially Joni Marsh for the last 5+ years, and there are a lot of roadblocks that the developers themselves don't meet or agree with, which postpones the development on their end. We have a process, and if they don't follow the process all the time, then the development goes very slowly. The one that I can actually remember, which was very frustrating to me, was I'll just call it the turkey plant development. That went on for years, and it wasn't all because of our codes. It was various things that we followed along the way that kept pushing them back. So I don't want to leave our planning department out of these discussions and make it the city's fault as to why we don't have development.
Thank you, Councilmember Peck, and valid and well taken point. We certainly we cannot leave staff out of these conversations. Our only goal is to help to inform those conversations and ensure that we're doing the best that we possibly can as a community to achieve all of our shared goals and priorities. And our goal is not to place all blame on city staff or the city process or city code, but to do a critical assessment of the process on both sides. So if there are things that developers are continually getting hung up on their side, is there a way that we can clarify that? Or is there a way that we can better communicate to the development community what those expectations are going to be so they don't get hung up on them on their side? So the intent is not to place blame, or of anything that we're doing is not to place blame or to suggest that there's more blame on one side or the other, but just to, again, critically assess and make suggestions for how the process might be improved on both sides while still adhering to code and to the policies of this city.
Okay, agreed. And I wasn't really assessing blame or judging that you were blaming. I just didn't want council, as well as the business section and staff, to know that we're working together. It is not, yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just mention too that goes directly to Councilman Waters' reference to that addendum to our contract that really says, let's do this together. Engage us where we can be helpful, and we'll engage the community, the business community, the development community, where they can be helpful. And I think we've done that successfully in some cases and with some challenge in other cases. And so always room for improvement. But it's been, at least the conversations are happening, which isn't the case in all places, I think.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
The people, there are about 38 employees at Lucky's who make considerably less than the people at Novartis. And I was wondering if we did anything to help them.
I'm sorry, are you talking about Alfalfa's or Lucky's or both?
Yes, I mean, I'm sorry. We lost Lucky's too, but yeah. I'm talking about Alfalfa's.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Christensen. So yes, our Boulder County Workforce Development did work directly with, well, I shouldn't say, I don't know what's happening with Alfalfa's, but certainly with the employees of Lucky's. One of the kind of unusual circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic is that jobs in the grocery industry were not in short supply. Our grocers performed very well. And so it was really connecting people to that local very high demand for similar positions within our community, but certainly Workforce Boulder County served as a resource for those employees as well.
All right, thank you very much. Don't see any further questions from City Council, so I would move acceptance of the Longmont Economic Development Partnership Quarterly Report for the first quarter of 2021.
Second.
All right, it was moved by myself and seconded by Councilmember Waters. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, the vote passes 6-0 with Councilmember Bagley or Mayor Bagley absent. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next quarter.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we'll move on to study session items. Item 6A is Inclusionary Housing Program 2020 Snapshot. At this time, if Kathy Fedler would come on and let us know what's going on.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Kathy Fedler, Housing and Community Investment Division Manager. Tonight, I'm going to present to you the 2020 report on inclusionary housing, the annual report that's due to Council each year. If you want to go ahead and put up the slide deck, that would be great. And you could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is going to be in 3 sections. One's in the inclusionary housing program snapshot. The second one will be a little bit about market forces. And then the third one will be how we're doing on meeting our affordable housing goal. Next slide, please. So this provides information on the projects, different projects that are under inclusionary housing, and it is providing a contrast with 2019, the information that was provided to you under last year's report. Many of the current developments that are under construction or still in the development review process were approved prior to the ordinance. So this is not everything that's going on in Longmont, but just those that are under inclusionary housing. So as you can see, in 2020, we had 30 different developments in process. 25 of those have provided how they're going to commit to providing their affordable housing. 5 still have not at this point in time. Rental projects, there are 12 of the 30 that are rental projects. And of those, 4 are have elected to make the fee in lieu. And 8 will be providing their rental units, affordable rental units on site. 13 of the projects are for sale, have for sale product. 7 of those will be making fee in lieu. 3 will provide units on site, and 3 have agreed to provide middle tier housing. Go to the next slide, please. So the projects that are providing homes on site, of the rental projects, there are 12 total rental projects comprising 818 total homes. And 290 of those, or about 35%, are affordable, meet the affordable requirements. 26 of those will be provided by VCP as part of the Mountain Brook project. 73 are under construction right now by the Boulder County Housing Authority. So both of those are nonprofits. 148 are being provided by market developers, but they are within 100% affordable developments. And then 43 are provided within regular market rate developments. Of the 13 for sale projects, there's a total of 1,170 homes within those developments. 24 affordable homes will be provided which is about 2%. And the majority of those, or about 20 of them, will be provided in partnership with nonprofits, particularly Habitat for Humanity. Next slide, please. Projects making the fee in lieu to date, 4 of the are rental projects. That's 33% of the total rentals. And 7 projects are for sale, which is 54% of the total for sale projects. We are estimating about 4.6 million to come in through 2023. And this is just an estimate because at this point, we don't have good information on the square footage of the units within the developments, et cetera. So this is going to be fluctuating, but this is kind of our best estimate at this point in time. Next slide, please. And then the interest in middle tier housing building. 3 developments have either signed agreements or have plat notes committing to providing middle tier homes. The 3 developments are Baker Street Townhomes, which are going to be providing all 14 of their units in the 80 to 100% AMI range. Denio West providing 15 townhomes within the 80 to 100% range. And then the Highlands single family part of the Highlands development will be about 42 units. And at this point, we don't know for sure, but I put them in the higher end category, the middle tier C, because they haven't given us fully what tier they intend to meet. So, and just a caution that these could change even after these agreements are in place and even after they start construction, since the sales price check against the AMI limits isn't done until the certificate of occupancy is requested. So that is subject to change. If they don't meet the tier, it'll go up to the next tier, or it might even result in a fee in lieu being paid ultimately. And it's a total of 71 total units. Next slide. So moving into the market housing snapshot and what's happening in the market. Next slide, please. Median sales prices continue to increase. They kind of flattened a little bit from 2018 to 2019, but then they're increasing again. And the indications are that they're going to continue to increase with the information we've gotten to date on the first quarter sales prices. There was a 6% increase in detached for sale product and a 9% increase in the attached for sale product in Longmont in 2019 to 2020. Next slide, please. For new homes versus existing home sales, new homes are becoming a greater part of home sales, increasing from a low of 4% in 2010 to a high of 30.2% in 2019. And then 2020 ended at 24.2% of new home sales, or all home sales were newer home sales. So I think the important thing to look at this is that new home sales are not going to get us where we need to be with affordable housing for sure. It's gonna take a broader depth and breadth of providing affordable housing as we move to meet our 12% goal. Next slide. So the income needed to purchase or rent in Longmont, I know you've seen this before, and it continues to kind of spiral up. The top blue line is the income needed to afford a single family medium priced home in Longmont. The red solid line is the income needed to afford an attached median priced home. The green solid line is the city's median household income. And again, there's a lag in the census data, which is where this information comes from. So we only go to 2019 for that particular data set. The dashed line is the 80% HUD median income for a 3-person household, which is what we use to set the 2-bedroom for sale home. And the purple, I guess it's purple. Don't know if it's showing that as on your slide, but is the solid line is the income needed to afford the average rents. And then the dashed purple line is the 50% HUD median income for a 2-person household, which is roughly equivalent to what would be in the average rental apartment. Next slide. Oh, can you go back just a minute? Sorry. So I did want to add, so if you can see that in 2012 is when a family at 80% of the area median income or at our city median could no longer afford to purchase a detached home. And then 2015 was when both the 80% area median income and our city median wage earners could no longer afford the median attached home prices. So we've been kind of out of whack since 2015, really, with the ability to afford the median for sale and, or I'm sorry, detached and attached product. Next slide. And then looking at rental need versus inclusionary housing provision. So this is a top data set is from the consolidated plan, which shows the greatest rental housing need at 40% area median income and below. Inclusionary housing rental projects are providing primarily 60% area median income where there is little to no gap or need. The bottom chart shows of the rental homes where they're falling in each AMI category. We are having a lot of units at 30% area median income. This could change if the Element project at the Suites, which is permanent supportive housing, is a good portion of that. That's 50 of the units. If that does not get funded by CHAFA, then that would fall through, and that would be a much lower number there. So again, this is fluctuates and is subject to change. It's kind of a snapshot in time of what this is. Next slide, please. And then the impacts of a fairly stagnant income on the ability to afford rent. As you can see from this one, I did pull out a single person household earning 50% of the area median income, which is about $40,300, which equates to $19.37 per hour at full-time employment. And that wage cannot afford the average rent in Longmont at this point in time. Next slide, please. So then looking at our affordable housing goal, next slide. This is a really nice graphic, I think, that our marketing team came up with to show the progress that we're making towards meeting the goal. And it does include past years, so it is a good comparison. So as you can see on the left side, as you're looking at this, 2018, 2019, 2020, we've moved from 2,300 units to 2,400 units. And the percent of goal that we're meeting, we have dropped from 6.2% in 2018 to 6.07% in 2020. Part of this is because an increase in non-affordable housing units, just our housing unit count in general. Looking forward to 2021 through 2023 and projecting what we think we'll meet with 73 units completed in 2021 would put us at 2,500. Another 175 units projected in 2022 would get us to 2,680, and then 2023, another 243 units would get us to almost 3,000 units. So right now at the end of 2020, we've met 45% of our total goal at this point in time. We are going to need to create about 200 to 300 new affordable homes annually while maintaining and preserving all existing affordable homes in order to meet our goal by 2035 in Longmont. And that is not just new construction, it is also work that we need to do around acquiring market developments and converting them to affordable and preserving market affordable as well. Next slide, please. So the pipeline of inclusionary affordable homes that we're looking at, this is kind of projecting again the number of units that was on that prior sheet, but comparing it to the estimated building permits that we think is going to happen. If we do have this projection come true, with 628 and 628 and 21 and 22 total permits, along with the projected affordable housing and 700 in 2023, we would reach just under 7% goal attainment by 2023. Okay, next slide, please. So what kinds of things are we tracking? We are trying to get some good data as metrics, but has been slow coming because it takes a while for units to get produced and really provide good information. So looking at changes in building permits, that was one of the areas that we wanted to track. How are changes in our permits comparing to the state or surrounding communities? You'll notice that we had an 11% decline in permits issued from 2018 to 2019, and a 22% decrease from 2019 to 2020. The information gathered from other St. Vrain Valley School District communities shows decreases between 8% and 23% for the 2018-2019 period, and between 7 and 56% for 2019 to 2020 in those other communities, with the exception of Frederick and Meade, who both experienced increases in both of those time periods. So all the other St. Vrain Valley communities, Firestone, Erie, Dacono, Broomfield, parts of Broomfield, experienced decreases like we did. I haven't gotten broader out because it's hard to get data. So we are continuing to gather some of that information from some of the other further out communities as well. Because I think part of what we wanted to do was compare what we're doing with inclusionary housing to communities that don't have that, perhaps that might be different, just showing different trends than we do. Looking at changes in median home sale prices and rent prices. This is something that is definitely impacting the program and our ability to provide affordable housing. Not quite sure in what ways yet. So we will be looking at what impacts there might be on the inclusionary housing goal, some of the impacts on the AMI targets by changing the rental AMI target to 50%. That should result in more units that are affordable to lower incomes households, which is where our greatest need is. And then the market is just not providing much in the way of affordable housing units. But a few are coming from existing home sales, but very, very few. And I don't have the data yet for 2020 on what that is, but we will get that. And as we get this, I will update you on some of this information. How the units are being provided was another indicator. Is the fee in lieu sufficient to replace the units? Right now, insufficient payments have been made to analyze against costs. So that one we'll be taking a look at as we get more fee in lieu coming in. The supposition is that probably it's not, with the increasing costs of construction or even the increasing cost to acquire and rehab existing homes or apartment buildings. But we will keep track of that as well. Again, our 12% goal attainment, right now we're at 6.07%. So at this point, we are barely gaining ground. We need to ramp up our production of affordable housing production in units. So, and then who's being served with the program? Again, insufficient data at this point to determine this until we start getting some folks in units. Next slide, please. So some of the trends, several for sale developments have changed their option that they selected from on-site to fee in lieu in 2020. And that was about 54% of the total made that change. And rental affordable housing units are primarily being provided on site, which is about 66% of the projects. Some of the issues or concerns didn't have too much at this point in time since we just went through some code changes. The sales, I want to remind you, the sales price adjustments and whether or not we take a look at that is coming back to you. We are in the process of gathering community and builder input on some of that, so that will be coming back. And then I did want to get feedback from y'all if there are any changes to the snapshot. It was changed up a little bit this year. If there's anything that you would prefer not to see or would prefer to see on that, that is something that's going to go on the website, and you got a copy of it with your council communication as well. Next slide. And then this is just some of the developments in 2020 that came on board. The Micah Homes project was 6 units of affordable housing that started leasing, got their COs and started leasing in 2020. The Blue Vista for sale development has a total of 26 affordable homes. 15 were sold in 2020 and 11 are available at this point in time. And Blue Vista was one of the featured projects on that snapshot. That was a new thing that we added to the snapshot this year. So I'd be interested in hearing if you think that is a good idea or not. Fall River, again, got its COs in 2020 and are fully leased, and we're starting to see some unit vacancies and turnover. So that project is working and going really well. And then the Greenspire Apartments up at just south of 21st, I think it's 21st on the east side of Maine. 44 total units that are the micro apartment units has just started leasing. So we don't have any data yet on how they're doing, but we'll try and get that and give some report back. But it's highly energy efficient. And again, those micro units to try and keep costs and rents really low for the residents. So that is the total sum of my presentation. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, first Councilmember Martin and then Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Kathy, I'm wondering, do you know how the other municipalities in Boulder County that kind of signed on to this goal of being 12% affordable by 2035? Is that the goal?
Yep.
How are they doing?
We are in the process of gathering that data. We provided information on how Longmont is doing and are just waiting for it to be compiled by Boulder County and put back out to us. So we should know, I would hope within the next couple of weeks, how other communities are doing and how the county as a whole is doing.
Sure, thank you. And how, when you say we're barely gaining ground on the percentage, is that because the percentage of market rate units keeps being built as well, so that we're not overtaking, because we're adding a lot of affordable units?
Correct, that's correct. It's that the ratio continues to outpace what we're doing to make some significant ground.
Okay. So we could find a way to make it less attractive to build expensive houses still.
That would be a way.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So Kathy, I noticed that you didn't have any reports on the land in lieu. Are we not getting any land in lieu, or is that included in fee in lieu?
It is not in fee in lieu, so that is a good point. We did not get any additional land beyond what you've heard about, which is the donation of within the Mountain Brook development and the donation that will happen within the Sugar Mill Paired Homes development. Both of those have come to council already, I believe. The other land is land that you already know about, the Costco land purchase that we're involved in, the 9 acres. And then some of the projects that we're doing with the Longmont Housing Authority and the land that they own as well. We'll be looking to ramp those up a little bit as well. They have a couple parcels that.
Okay. I have some other questions. Oh, by the way, so, and I wanted to say to Councilwoman Martin, a lot of the other municipalities like Louisville and all the mountain communities, all of their affordable housing is mostly built with Boulder Community Housing Partners, or yeah. So that, it's not individually built by them, so it's under their purview. So I was looking at the various information sites having to do with per capita income. Ours always gets quoted as household income. And when I look at the US per capita income from the Census Department and from Data USA, it says that it's approximately the same, that the household income is about 30,000, the median housing income in Longmont. And yours at the bottom says that 50% of AMI is $40,000. And you said that was for a one-person household. Can you explain why that's way higher than what the US census says, or the city data says?
Mhm. Yeah, that's because it's based on the Boulder County median income, because we are part of the Boulder County MSA.
Oh, so the amount, what you counted is based on the Boulder County. Yeah, it is much higher.
Yeah, the 50% AMI is based on the Boulder County figures that we get from HUD. The green line that showed the city median income is based on census data.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, so that's always a problem, and the state demographer also does not gather that granular data. It doesn't. It just gathers county data. So that always puts us in kind of a problem. So I wanted to give us some good news that as of yesterday, the Colorado State Legislature passed House Bill 21-1117. And I want to give a great shout out to Representatives Londine, Gonzalez Gutierrez, and Senators Julie Gonzalez and Senator Rodriguez, who have just been champs in this. And that means that the 1981 state preemption on rent control and the, in my opinion, ridiculous Telluride decision will no longer hold us hostage with our inclusionary housing ordinance. So we need to be talking with our city attorney about how we can, I didn't do anything. Anyway, so we are no longer held hostage to the 1981 state preemption on rent control and the erroneous Telluride decision. And we should consider rewriting the parts of our inclusionary housing ordinance that we were forced to kind of jury rig to work around the problem with the Telluride decision. That would be one very good thing we could do, and that will give us a much simpler, cleaner, and more effective ordinance. I also think that we really need to think hard about prioritizing for sale housing. There are different ways we can, there are different kinds of housing for sale. You know, we can incentivize co-ops, we can, but the truth is that until we are able to get more people into home ownership of some kind of home, we will never get on top of this. And we really have to figure out ways to do that. There are different models of cooperatives and of very small homes and of, I won't go on and on, but anyway. anyway, I'm really proud and happy about all the things that we've gotten, like the Micah homes and the Greenspire apartments, because we really need single room occupancy for affordability for people. People are happy and have always lived in small spaces when they're young or older, and they want something they can afford to live in. They can make it comfortable for themselves. We have to have a broader range of housing opportunities for people. And we lost, I think, 5% of housing in the meltdown of 2007. So anyway, the passage of House Bill 21117 is a really positive thing for the city and for the whole state. So I just wanted to let people know about that in case you hadn't heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. So staying on the theme here of for sale homes, detached or attached, but I'm looking, Kathy, at your graph, the second page of I'm not certain which, maybe it was slide 10, I don't know, but on the second page of the graphic we got, the infographic we got with tonight's materials, is one of the tables you presented that shows the blue line of the income needed to afford a single family detached home, right? Since 2010, and then income needed to afford that attached home. So if I were to draw a line from the current median income is, $350,000 is where that line would intersect, I think, in terms of cost, right? And we're looking at the area median income at 479,000. And since it's highly unlikely that as a council we're going to do much to accelerate earnings by individuals, unless Jessica is remarkably successful in bringing, the kinds of primary employers to town, which is one of the reasons she continues to do what she does, that creates jobs that will give people a chance to earn enough to purchase an attainable home that's priced for them as a working family. Whether it's co-ops, as Councilmember Christensen mentioned, or examples of the missing middle, it feels to me as a member of this council that we just have not had enough discussion about. I'm proud of what we've done with the IH or IZ ordinance. Without it, it'd be interesting to see where we would be, Kathy. We haven't kept pace with overall construction, so the percentage hasn't grown relative to the total inventory, but we are seeing growth in the number of affordable units, right? That's obviously a good trend. But we've seen zero progress, it seems to me, and maybe I'm missing it, or in comparison to our affordable units, much less progress on attainable units. And as a council, we haven't set a target. In the absence of a target, we'll continue to talk about the problem. And I fear we won't get as focused on strategy as we need to. And I'm not certain what all we can do, but at the end of the day, if we can't figure out how to reduce the cost of initial entry of for sale homes, that gap's not going to get any better. It's going to cripple what Jessica's trying to do. And it's going to contribute to congestion in this town. We already have 60% of the people who work in this town commute into this town because they can't afford homes. City employees, school district employees, working families. And it seems to me that we have an obligation as a council. We ought to feel as compelled to set a clear target and strategies for achieving that target for attainable housing as we have for affordable housing. So when those items come back to us in terms of what the mid-tier exception numbers are, Kathy, I'm going to be really keen to follow up on that. Just as one member of a council, I'm going to continue to try to make the point that we have an obligation to be as aggressive or as creative and as supportive of that segment of the continuum as we have for folks earning 50% or below of AMI. It's all important. Now, not one more or less important than the other. I just think we have not given the attention we need to give to attainable housing for working families. That is the foundation for much of what we heard from Jessica and what we need to do remain a community that looks like Longmont rather than some of our neighboring communities, right? We hear a lot. In fact, we heard earlier tonight, stop building, put a cap on growth. Well, that certainly is not going to get us where we need to be in terms of reducing housing insecurity and creating options for young and working families in Longmont. And I think we have that obligation as a group of elected officials. So I think I appreciate the report. I appreciate what you've done with it. I think it's displayed clearly. I'm going to continue to think about your question about what other data we might want to take a look at here. But I think we're headed in the right direction. I just think we have a lot more work to do on the attainable housing end of this continuum. Thanks.
Harold?
Yeah, if I may jump in on this, I think to touch base on a couple of these components. Kathy mentioned the 9 acres that was part of the project that we had at the Costco site. As we're talking about that and we own it within our affordable housing fund, that is something that we're looking at when you can get that amount of land to really figure out how do you look at the for sale product and how can we facilitate that conversation, because it's probably, I think, one of the larger parcels we've had to really engage in that. And as we're talking about this, in many ways, we're waiting to see what happens with the Department of Treasury and some of the rules on the ARPA funds, because we think that may be an opportunity to truly do something that transcends or that really hits our community in a way we haven't seen it. And those are things we're going to be bringing to you all once we understand what the rules are and what that looks like, because we know housing's in there. We just are not sure how they're really going to talk about the funding. And so those are things we will be bringing back to you all in the near future once we get clarity.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I agree with Councilman Waters and the rest of council that we need to look more at the middle tier. However, I think that now that this council is LHA board, we can probably build some middle tier housing through LHA. They have been specifically targeting older members of our city for that housing. And I understand that we need a housing for older people like myself, but we need to be more diversified in LHA and be able to build some mid-tier housing there as well. So that I just want that to be part of the discussion when we address this, perhaps at the retreat or some other venue.
All right, thank you. I guess I'll just chime in real quickly here and say that one important piece that I noticed in the presentation was that Kathy said that, at least according to the numbers, we're not going to build ourselves out of this issue. And so while this is not necessarily the appropriate time, I challenge staff as well as my colleagues on council to continue to be flexible and think of new outside of the box kinds of concepts that we would be appropriate for the city of Longmont. Because if we can't build ourselves out of this problem, we're going to have to look at some other ways definitely to do this. And so I think that's important for us all to remember. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Inclusionary Housing Program 2020 snapshot as a report.
Second.
Thank you. I made the motion and multiple council members will just go with, I think Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring hasn't said too much, so we'll just give her the second on this one. So at this time, and I take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. All right, the motion carries 6-0 with Mayor Bagley absent. Thank you very much. At this time, we've been going for a while because we've been going with executive session as well. We'll just take a quick 3 to 5 minute break just for, personal break time. Thank you.
Folks, if you're listening into tonight's study session, just a reminder that we're on a quick break and we will resume the council session in just a few moments.
It's been about 5 minutes, yeah? Good,
Indeed, Mayor Pro Tem.
all right. Let's get everybody back on camera and we'll resume. Okay, looks like we're just waiting on Polly and Marcia. All right, Councilmember Martin's back with us. Just waiting for Councilmember Christensen and then we will resume. Well, I'm sure Councilmember Christensen will be with us momentarily. I saw her briefly. So why don't we just go ahead and resume study session items. Agenda item 6B, accept the City of Longmont's 2021-2022 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan. This time I'd like to invite Deputy City Manager Dale Rademacher to begin the presentation.
Council and Mayor Pro Tem. Tonight, Ken Houston, our Water Resource Manager, is going to present to you the city's 2021 drought management plan. Without stealing all of Ken's thunder, we all know that we've received some pretty significant moisture, really starting in March, in particular on the South Platte River Basin. And so although the situation is still tenuous, as the caller mentioned, on the Colorado River, certainly not as good as we are doing here on the South Platte. I think, Ken's going to talk to us about both of those and really how it ties to the city's water supply, not just this year, but also looking 2 to 3 years into the future. So Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dale, very much. If we can go ahead and load up the PowerPoint. So today I'd like to present to you the city's 2021-2022 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan. The city brings this to Council and Water Board every year in the spring, once we have a better picture of our water supply, both to inform Council and the public, but also as preparatory to any water conservation efforts that we need to do. So next slide will give you a summary of some of the information of where we currently are with our water supply. The great news is tonight is that right now we're at 147% supply level, supply to demand, which is a robust water supply for us. That's the good news. The snowpack, the stream flow, and water storage, all three major things we look at are near average in the St. Vrain Basin, just slightly below, except for the snowpack, which is slightly above, but all are doing quite well right now. And as Dale indicated, that's really a result of some really decent moisture that we received in early March and then late April. So that really did help us out. So our projections for our total water supply in 2022 and 2023 are near average and above our trigger points for increased drought action. That is one of the key points in our water supply planning is we look not only at the current year water supply, but we also project out 2 years into the future, because what we do this year, of course, impacts what water we'll have in future years. So the next slide gives us a summary of the planning purposes. And really our purpose is to guide staff, Water Board and Council in evaluating and responding to drought impacts and inform the public of the city's water supply. During this process, the drought response levels are determined by evaluating the supply versus the demand. And we'll get to that a little bit later on, the actual numbers. And finally, the drought response level is then determined by City Council through adoption of this water supply and drought management plan. The next slide gives you a good indication, a good description of what we really consider a drought. A drought is really any time we have below average stream flow that due to its severity stresses the ability of the city's water supply to meet demands. Typically, you think of a drought as an extended dry period, but many things can actually impact our water supply, and all of those types of things are looked at. Essentially, in the water supply plan, the drought supply plan we have before you tonight, we have 4 levels of drought response. And the city is really always in what we consider a sustainable conservation level. That actually is a level that we worked with, our water board helped us work out a number of years ago, and it's really trying to always keep water conservation at our forefront. So that's anytime we have greater than 135% of supply to demand ratio. Then it ratchets down from there. Level 1 is 120 to 135%. Level 2 is 105 to 120. And then level 3 is critical impact, which is less than 105. So we're getting really close to what we need for our water supply. So the next slide gets you where we are with our current level. Water board and staff have evaluated the numbers, and at 147%, we believe we are currently should be in a sustainable conservation level. At that level, we will continue to implement public information efforts on water conservation. We always try to look at a 10% reduction in city water use. We're always trying to look, especially at our city water use. That's where we have the greatest control over. Try to keep that. This year, even though we have a slightly more robust water supply, we are not planning on having a surplus water declaration. That happens in some years when we have sufficient water that we know we won't be using, that we then can lease out to the local St. Vrain agricultural community, but we're not quite there this year. And then, of course, we continue to look at our supply and demands. The next slide shows you the current South Platte Basin snowpack, and I've got 3 of these graphs real quickly. The top of the graph, top of the blue bar, is the highest snowpack we've had. The bottom red bar is the lowest snowpack. The green bar in the middle is the average or the median snowpack. So as of this morning, we're at the black line, which is the current year, water year. We're at 101% in the South Platte, overall South Platte Basin. That's really good. You can see in March and April, those 2 jumps that we had because of the moisture. But you can also see early in the year, from November 1st all the way until we got well into March, we were well below the average, even in the South Platte. So the drought had continued well into the new year, but luckily we got some good moisture lately. And then the next graph shows you the actual St. Vrain Creek Basin snowpack. This is actually in the Wild Basin. This is the Wild Basin Snowtell on the North St. Vrain Creek, upstream of Button Rock Dam, Ralph Price Reservoir. So this is really our primary water supply. 60% of our water supply is the North St. Vrain Creek. We are sitting at 114% of average, which we're proud to say that's like the second best mini watershed in the state. So we're doing quite well from that standpoint. But the cautionary point is the next slide, which shows the Colorado River snowpack. As you can see, it's down overall on the Colorado River at 66%. So that shows the extent of the drought that's continuing on the west slope and further west. Now, this is a slightly rougher than what we will experience as our water supply. The lower part of the Colorado River is in a much more severe drought than the upper part. We're actually, most of our snowtell sites in the upper Colorado that provides water to both Windy Gap and the Colorado Big Thompson projects are in the 70% range, anywhere from 72 to 78%. So we're a little bit better than this, but we're still below average on the Colorado River snowpack. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The next slide shows the current water storage, getting into some actual numbers here. On the St. Vrain Creek, there's 59,000 acre feet of major storage. Of course, not all of that's Longmont's, but 39,000 of the 59,000 acre feet are currently full, or 67% of capacity. The last 5-year average is about 77%, so we're slightly below on storage. That really is reflecting a little more storage that was taken out of water that was taken out of storage last summer during the drought, as well as the earlier part of the year. It was dry enough that we had below average runoff all through the winter. And so we're just now starting to pick back up. The good part is this more recent moisture has kicked our river, and we're actually, the St. Vrain Creek is higher than average, running higher than average right now. Button Rock's doing real well, and it looks like we'll rapidly catch up and exceed the average in the St. Vrain Creek. South Platte River, similar situation. It's got 262,000 of the 281,000 acre feet full, 93%. The 5-year average is 96%. So still have fairly decent storage, but the next month is where we'll be able to pick up on the water storage. The next slide is going to introduce us to the Colorado River update, getting back to a little bit of the dry water weather we've had over there, and talking about a number of the issues that are going on in the Colorado River. The next slide highlights probably four of the bigger issues on the Colorado River. The first is the severe drought that's affecting the whole Colorado River watershed, not just the Colorado River in Colorado, but all the way down through all the lower basin states as well. In fact, it gets worse as you go west. The second big issue is storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Lake Powell's currently at 35% capacity, and Lake Mead is at 38% capacity. So that's very low, especially for this time of year, although this is the low point of the year for both of those reservoirs. They will gain additional water during the spring runoff, but that's an issue. The third issue I wanted to talk to a little bit about was the United States Bureau of Reclamation shortage declaration on the Colorado River. You've probably heard a little bit about that in the news recently. Wanted to talk a little bit about that and how that would impact us. And then finally talk a little bit about the wildfire impacts in the Colorado River. So the next slide, it kind of highlights the first issue we talked about. That's the drought. You can see this is the drought in the entire United States. You can really see the exceptionally dry conditions and drought conditions in the southwestern United States. It really kind of dividing line there on the Continental Divide, where while we are in drought on the east side, it's not as severe as the west side. But the next slide will show you a close-up of Colorado. Again, the exceptional drought that's continuing on the lower Colorado. Not quite as bad in Grand County and Jackson County up towards the Continental Divide. The one thing I would like to point out is if you look at the map, there's a little anomaly right there, starts at Longmont, goes up to Fort Collins and heads west towards the Continental Divide. That area actually is considered to be out of a drought. We all know the recent rains and snow has helped. So this is the last map that came out late last week. Actually, the next one that comes out late this week, early next week, will probably have that even slightly larger area. But well, it's good to have an excellent water supply. It's also good to be the lucky people that are right in the middle of that area that has the least of the impact. But that west slope we have to pay attention to. Then the next slide gives you a little bit of the information on the USBR shortage declaration. Unfortunately, in a lot of the news media, it didn't really describe really well what a shortage declaration is and what it means. Essentially, a shortage declaration occurs when Lake Mead is projected to reach an elevation of 1,075 foot, which is about 9.4 million acre feet in Lake Mead. Either that elevation or low projected at the end of the water year. Currently, it looks like the Bureau of Reclamation is going to project that will occur this year in Lake Mead. The critical point for Longmont and Colorado is that only affects lower basin delivery out of Lake Mead. The part that wasn't really well described, I felt in the media, is it made people think, well, that was a shortage that would affect water deliveries in all of the Colorado River. It only affects deliveries for out of Lake Mead. The deliveries out of Lake Powell, which is the upper Colorado River deliveries, are governed by the 1922 Interstate Compact. That's 7.5 million acre feet a year, 75 million acre feet on a 10-year rolling average. That doesn't change. That won't change. The Shortage Declaration, while it makes it's sobering, it doesn't change that Interstate Compact. What we really look at for the Interstate Compact is what is the upper basin deliveries for the Interstate Compact. For the last 10 years, we are currently sitting at 92.5 million acre feet. So well in excess of the 75 million acre feet that are required by the Interstate Compact. And if you add in the US-Mexico water treaty, which delivers water to Mexico out of the Colorado River, there's another 1.25 million acre feet that has to be delivered for that. So that's around 82 million acre feet in 10 years. So we're still about 10 million acre feet above that. So even if you look at and consider the long essentially a 20-year drought period we've been experiencing, we've still had robust deliveries out of Lake Powell and have been able to effectively meet and actually exceed the Colorado River Compact. That number is actually higher than the Colorado River Compact would require, primarily because there is part of the operations of the entire Colorado River are based upon an equalization protocol between Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which sometimes delivers slightly more water than necessary out of Lake Powell to equalize what comes out of Lake Mead. So actually a shortage declaration on Lake Mead will ramp down some of the releases out of Lake Mead, which will benefit Lake Powell not having to deliver as much water through the equalization protocol. So that equalization protocol is really probably the biggest thing that impacts the upper basin. This is not to say that we don't have to pay attention to this. Everybody wants to look very, very closely at what's happening on the Colorado River. The state of Colorado is developing a lot of robust planning and techniques to try to keep water in the Lake Powell and keep water deliveries to meet. Certainly don't want to come anywhere close to worrying about the Colorado River. So between the drought and the shortage declaration, it certainly put a focus on the Colorado River. That being said, we're doing quite well on the CBT system. The projections aren't to completely fill the CBT system this year, but it will come close. And even better news is we actually were able to start the Windy Gap pumps yesterday. One of the nice, Windy Gap is going to come through for us this year because one of the nice things on the west slope, one of the better snowpacks is the Fraser River snowpack, which is basically Berthoud Pass, Winter Park ski area down to Fraser, and that that's in the 80%. So we should have a fairly decent pumping year for the Windy Gap project. That will really help us in two aspects. The first is it will provide additional water for storage in the CBT and additional water supply for Longmont and the other Windy Gap participants. The second thing is Fraser River was not impacted by the fires, so it'll be additional source of clean water into the CBT system, which kind of leads me into my next slide, which is a short discussion on the wildfire impacts. It's been a little while, it's been since last fall, but I'm sure we all remember the wildfire impacts. The next slide will show you the actual footprints of all the wildfires. The one on the top or the north side of the map is the Cameron Peak fire that burnt actually completely clear out of the Cashel-Poudre River watershed and into the Big Thompson River area. The furthest left or west fire is the troublesome fire that burnt a significant portion of the Colorado Big Thompson drainage burnt on into Rocky Mountain National Park, and for at least for me, unbelievably jumped the Continental Divide and started down the Big Thompson River. And then the blue circle is the approximate North St. Vrain Creek drainage, our watershed, with Button Rock in the X there. And then just south of that is the Boulder County, is the Calwood fire footprint, which is just, it actually burned both the left-hand creek main drainage and a little bit of the Central Gulch in the South St. Vrain drainage. If you look at that map, it was only about 1.5 miles from our North St. Vrain drainage to the Calwood fire. It was only about 3 miles from the west side of, or the east side of the troublesome fire in Fall River over to our drainage, and then only about 10 miles from the Cameron. So we really had all three of those fires approaching our watershed. But the good news is we didn't get any fire at all in the North St. Vrain Creek watershed, our primary water supply. There will be some impacts to both the left-hand creek and the South St. Vrain Creek, which flows into the St. Vrain Creek, but our water coming out from the North St. Vrain Creek will be above the Calwood fire impacts. There will be more than likely a number of incidents after major rainstorms where some ash will enter the streams, and we'll most likely even be able to be seen clear down into Longmont. But in terms of our treated water supply, we're good there and very happy. Probably the most problematic of the fires is the East Troublesome fire on the west slope, because that burnt a large portion of the CBT system. This year it won't impact us. Northern Water was able to bring over and essentially fill both Horsetooth and Carter Lake with good, clean, fresh water. So our water supply this year from the CBT will be completely unaffected. However, this summer there will be some runoff impacts into both Grand Lake, which will come from the North Inlet and the Rocky Mountain National Park part of the fire, and then as well as the main part of the fire goes into Lake Granby, as well as almost the entire Willow Creek Basin burnt, and the Willow Creek also goes into Lake Granby. So there will be some future impacts. We're certainly hopeful that there's enough water to dilute a lot of that. But on top of that, the Northern Water District is doing an incredible effort on the west slope, working with the U.S. Forest Service, Grand County, and other water users over there to do fire response there. So a lot of fire response going on in all three of those fires. And while the interesting thing about fires is if they don't impact you right away, for water supply, they do tend to impact you for 3 to 5 years and even longer after that. So it does, increase nutrients. So we'll certainly be following very closely what happens with the CBT. It won't impact us in quantity, but slight decrease in quality of water from that source, which we may have to supplement with a little bit more North St. Vrain. But we believe that right now we're sitting fairly good, and certainly working closely with Northern Water on our CBT supplies. So the next slide will introduce the final last thing I wanted to talk a little bit. I'm sure you heard in the news about the St. Vrain Creek fuel spill happened west of Lyons. Again, for Longmont, that spill was located in Apple Valley, the west side of Apple Valley, which is downstream of Longmont Reservoir, where we divert our water. So it did not impact our water supply. There are a few times in summer where we take water out of the Highland ditch through a pump right at our treatment plant, which would be downstream of that site, but that is not expected to have any impacts this summer. And we're most likely might not even pull any water out of there this summer, because we'll be watching closely the impacts of both the fuel spill and the Calwood fire. we're gonna be watching that really closely, but we have sufficient supplies both from our CBT and our North St. Vrain and Button Rock Longmont Reservoir. But we'll be able to have good treated water supply. So the next slide just kind of shows you that's actual truck that spilled. Interesting enough, it actually didn't, the wreck wasn't into the creek, it was on the other side of the road, but the tanker split and drained some fuel into the creek. It went down the borrow ditch that you're looking at there, and then into a culvert, and some of the fuel did make it into the creek. Luckily, both the Colorado Department of Transportation, the State Highway Patrol's hazmat teams responded quickly and set up foam cover, set up booms in the river. In fact, the next slide will show you the boom that they set up in the St. Vrain Creek just downstream, North St. Vrain Creek just downstream, and we're able to contain some of the fuel. And then the next slide gives you just a few of the spill details. There's about 1,200 gallons spilled, not known exactly for sure, but somewhere between 500 to 1,000 gallons made it through the borrow ditch into the creek. The EPA did take over the site and responded, and they are very good on hazardous waste spill control. And so they were in the creek right away taking samples. Within 2 days after the accident, we did get confirmation that there were no residual fuel in the water. Originally, there was some concern that some had worked its way into the water column, but it pretty much had flushed through. So there is, they're not detecting any in the fuel. There is some, as you can imagine, on the creek, on some of the rocks on the creek banks, and they may actually end up having to clean some of those. But as far as any residual fuel in the water, they are not detecting any. And there were no impacts to Longmont's drinking water supply, and we don't anticipate any. And even the EPA has said that basically the incident is over. You will probably have read about some residual fuel that they're having a little bit difficult time picking up. What happened is some of that fuel soaked into the ground on the borrow ditch side, the other borrow ditch, the non-stream side. And actually some of it worked its way underneath the asphalt of the road. So they would literally have to tear up the road to remove that. So they're probably not going to remove that. They'll monitor and make sure it doesn't move. But in terms of the water supply, we believe that incident is over, and our water supply was always fully safe. So next slide will get us kind of back to our 2021-22 water supply and drought management plan. I did want to cover a lot of those other issues because they do impact us, but looking at all of those things, our next slide will actually show you table A, which is in your packet, that is our projected water supply. And just real briefly, if you look at the first of the three green lines marked 2021, that's our projected raw water availability for all of 2021, 147% this year, 139% next year, and 135% the following year. So that shows that we do have an adequate water supply for the next 3 years. We're able to project out those second 2 years based upon water that is currently in storage with Longmont. And the next slide will show you the table B in your packet, which is there's really two categories we look at. One is projected water supply. The second is Ralph Price Reservoir Storage, our primary water storage bucket. If it, in the first year of a drought, if it's greater than 90%, we on July 15th, we consider ourselves as sustainable. And then you can see down below other triggers for the other response levels. We actually project to be 100%. In fact, right now we're about 95%. We actually got a little bit of additional water in there just recently. We probably will have Ralph Price Reservoir filled even before the end of this month. The runoff is, the moisture has really helped with the runoff, and we're just within about about 25 or 50 CFS on the creek of meeting all the the calls downstream of Button Rock. At that point, the remainder will stay in Button Rock. And so we're pretty confident we will fill Button Rock. So the next slide will just kind of give you a bird's eye view of the Wild Basin area. North St. Vrain, the left side, the larger snow cap peak there is Copeland. On the right side, you can see Meeker and Longs, and the mountain range in between those two is the upper reaches of the Wild Basin. This was just taken a couple days ago, so robust snowpack up there. You actually rarely see Meeker that white. It turns brown pretty quickly, but we're happy to see that much snow up in our watershed, and that would conclude my presentation. We're recommending council accept the water supply drop plan at a sustainable conservation level, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for that presentation, Ken. It was really helpful, but I have a what if question. We are just beginning our wildfire season, New Mexico, that wildfire that's in New Mexico and in the northern Arizona mountain. I read about it, I think, in the New York Times, and they were alluding to the Colorado River. So my question is, as we get into this fire season, I'm assuming it's not going to be, hopefully not as bad as last year, but who knows? Are we prepared, or how do we release more water to the Colorado River, which is what Arizona uses or leases from us, in case they need it for wildfires? Are we prepared to do that? And what is the plan, if any?
So well, Arizona is a big state.
I know.
So
with no water.
the primary water supply for Arizona is the Central Arizona Project that delivers water out of the Colorado River, actually pumps it out of the Colorado River, delivers it to a canal that goes down into Arizona. That the Arizona has an allotment of the lower basin allotment of theoretically 7.5 million acre feet. Their allotment, while it will be slightly reduced, and I apologize, I don't remember the numbers for the lower river, but it only reduces about, even if there's a shortage declaration. So if there's not a shortage declaration, which there probably will be, they'll have a full delivery for this year. If there is a shortage declaration, at this first shortage level, it only reduces their deliveries about 10%. While that is, if you're in Arizona, you don't like that.
Exactly.
That's still hundreds of thousands of acre feet will be delivered. I believe it's around 250,000 acre feet, something like that, will be delivered to Arizona through that. I think Dale had a little more input.
Just to help with that that question, Councilmember Peck, wildfires, while they're hugely devastating, right, on the landscape, the amount of water that's actually used to try to fight a wildfire is actually quite small. And if we think it through, it's the amount of water that they can put into a tanker plane or a helicopter. It's a very small percentage of the total supply. And I would suspect that the state of Arizona would prioritize that above things like lawn irrigations and different things in the Phoenix area, that they would step up as a state, which is what Colorado would do to prioritize their water uses. And I think, as Ken said, if there is any shortage into Arizona, it's at a manageable level. When I toured the lower Colorado, I can share with you at some point what I saw. I was quite disappointed in how the water is used in the lower Colorado. I was actually shocked at how frugal we are in the state of Colorado and with our water use. I did not see that in the state of California, and I did not see that in Arizona. And got a lot of friends in both of those states, so I don't want them to take it wrong. But it was phenomenal, and I was shocked. Yeah, as both a farmer, right, and as a municipal employee, there's a lot of work that can be done in all of the lower states, in the areas of conservation and the areas of prioritization of how the water is used. And I would encourage that, that Colorado, we set that example of, not that we're perfect, right? But we are very frugal compared to some of the uses that I witnessed.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to know, and you answered it, how would that affect us in water shortage in other states that take from the Colorado River? So thank you for that answer.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, thank you both, Ken and Dale, for your comments and for this report. I guess I know we're meeting the letter of the law and we're exceeding things and all that, but the truth is that we are still, no matter what we write or what we say, this is still a high plains desert, and people who work the land understand that. And I have friends on the western slope who used to be able to run cattle and horses. They can't anymore because there is no water. And according to what I've read, 80% of the water falls on the western slope, but 80% of people live on the eastern slope. So this is not a exactly natural drought. We're doing okay on the eastern slope, but it's at the expense of sucking water out of the Colorado River and the watersheds that go in to the Colorado River on the western slope. And I just would, I mean, we all waste water stupidly, but we try not to. I agree with Dale. I've been to Arizona. It's like there's a golf course every 5 feet. What are you thinking? I think we do try to be thrifty. A lot of people are putting in lawns of things like buffalo grass that use lots less water than Kentucky bluegrass. People are planting xeriscape, and I really do think we try a lot. And I would just say we need to keep on trying, because we really need to think of ourselves as a state and also as a nation. And further down the line, Baja California used to have a rich and fertile delta. Now it's a desert because it came from the Colorado River. It doesn't get down there anymore. And so we need to be thinking about everything, how what we do individually affects everybody. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This question is probably for Ken. What percentage of Longmont's water comes from west slope to east slope diversions? So I know we have Windy Gap. We have some Colorado Big Thompson rights. What else? And how much are those? How can you quantify those diversions? Because to hear other people asking questions, I'm getting this impression that, well, we should save water and put it back into Colorado, and that's not even where it came from a lot of the time.
So yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Martin, thank you. That's a great question. We actually, and I'm going to answer it in two phases. The first is our actual water use over the last 10 years or so has been approximately 50-50, about half of our water is West Slope water, about half of it is native basin. We actually have a guiding water principle that as we develop our water supply, our goal is to, at kind of build out of the city, to be 1/3 West Slope water and 2/3 native basin water. And so if you look at our water portfolio, when we're completely built out, about 2/3 of our supply will be St. Vrain Creek basin water.
Which is, it falls on the eastern slope.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And if there are restrictions on the western slope because of extended drought, what would be kind of the worst case scenario in terms of curtailment of the diversions of water that comes to Longmont? Would they be cut completely off? Would they be cut 80%? What would a compact call do to us?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and we would require quite a bit of crystal balling. But in essence, it would of course it really, the reason I hesitate a little bit, it really depends on how the state would administer the compact call. They're actually looking at that question right now. In my mind, the first answer always is, we'll curtail water based upon prior appropriation doctrine, which is the guiding water law in Colorado. In that case, all the senior water, all the junior water rights would be called out first. There's a lot of water rights that are junior, even to the Windy Gap. The Windy Gap's not real senior, but Windy Gap would be impacted first, and then the Colorado Big Thompson. It's highly unlikely the Colorado Big Thompson is going to be impacted very much because it's very, very senior on the west slope. You wouldn't be considered senior here on the east slope, but the 1930s is fairly senior on the west slope. So it would be pretty hard to get very far into that. Couldn't give you a number, but it would be some, but not hugely significant. Absent some type of more broad equalization where, you know, every water right on the west slope would be impacted. The state of Colorado is looking very hard at different techniques they can use to prevent that. One is better water conservation on the west slope. There are some ditches over there that have as low as 10% efficiency. Our ditches here are 60, 70%. There are cities over there that still don't have full metering even of water users. So a lot of water conservation will go on. Also, there's some potential to put water in storage in Lake Powell, kind of as a bank account where you actually pay people. And that, in my mind, is the most likely scenario where you could pay people not to use water. That water would be put in Lake Powell as a savings account and would be used in the event there ever is a Colorado River compact. We're a long ways away from that call right now, but yeah, it's really the next decade. A lot of people are going to talk about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So from a macro question to a micro question, in the materials, you list a number on page 7 and Roman numeral 3, you start to detail some of the best management practices, right, as suggestions for the city and for residents. And I did get an email or a text from a constituent today who pays close attention to what we do in our materials. And the question to me was, how often should we expect to see the city watering between 10 in the morning and 6 in the evening, since our recommendation to the residents are that we do not water during that period of time. And this resident was observing the fact that she observes the city watering during that period of time. What would you like me to feed back to that constituent?
I'll try that one, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Waters. Having responsibility over the parks system, which includes irrigation of not only the parks, but obviously the greenways and the right-of-ways. We have been investing pretty heavily in technology that allows us to hold off the watering in that window from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. This time of year, though, there are also testing systems as they're trying to bring them online. And so residents very well may see systems running as we're trying to activate the irrigation systems during the workday, right? When our staff is there. So the other thing I would say is we're not perfect. I would invite all residents to be our eyes and ears and help us. Sometimes systems fail. Sometimes heads on sprinkler systems fail, and we end up watering the street and not the park. And so we have a very diligent staff, but we have a very extensive park system as well to keep up. And the other thing I would add to that is, and council, we have been investing heavily in the infrastructure of the parks, in particular those irrigation systems. Unfortunately, they got themselves into a bit of disrepair, and frankly, we need to continue focusing on investing in those sprinkler systems and the controllers. But I can guarantee our staff is keenly aware of it, and frankly, we're calling each other on it. So we welcome those calls, and we will try to do the best we can.
I think it's a perfect response that you'd like our residents to be your eyes and ears and feed that information back. And we will as well when we hear from constituents. So thanks for the response.
Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring.
So, I have a follow-up question for Dale. So what would be the best method for residents if they are reporting something? Should they go to the website, contact us directly? What would be the most efficient way for members of the community to report such issues?
Everybody has different ways that they communicate these days.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks like to go to the website and send it in that way, and that's perfectly fine. All of that information ultimately gets funneled into our call centers. I would say the quickest way is use your cell phone, use your landline, whatever. Call into the city's call centers. We have systems that get that information into the call center, and they will initiate a work order request out quickly. So, phone calls are what people are best at doing, especially with the age of everybody walking around with the phone in there. And you know what? They can also send in a picture. A picture is always worth 1,000 words as well. But they're also, of course, welcome to call their council members. I wouldn't necessarily encourage that. I know you guys get a lot of calls, and we are set up. That's why you have a staff to do that. So I would encourage it. Phone calls is the best way.
Okay, and then I saw something on the news. I think it was yesterday, day before. Must have been yesterday. Today's only Tuesday. So about, and I don't know if it was the state or maybe it was just Denver. I kind of caught the tail end of it about watering restrictions. Does that sound familiar? Can you add some detail to that, please?
I can, and Ken probably has some additional detail, but this time of year, every water provider looks at their supply and comes out with a message for their customers. We're trying to do that better on a regional basis, especially when it comes to the television stations and those kinds of things. And so I know Longmont is partnering with many cities in the metro area as well as Boulder County to have common messaging. That all being said, not all cities are the same, not all water systems are the same. Our neighbors to the north, namely Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley, are going to have some pretty strict watering restrictions. They are heavily impacted by the Cameron Peak fire. They are anticipating some real struggles going into the next several years. And so I expect that we will hear messaging from our neighbors to the north. And we always hear the messaging from the neighbors to the south, Aurora and some of the metro area. And again, that can confuse people, right? What am I supposed to do? And so we try to keep our information on the city's website. We encourage our citizens and our customers and residents and community members to all go to the city's website, call in if you have a question. But this is a regional effort as well. And so we try not to be like completely out of sync, but we're not recommending right now that mandatory watering restrictions go in place. And there's good reason for that. It's sort of the crying wolf kind of thing. If you cry wolf every year, nobody's going to believe you when you really need them to cut back. And so we've always tried to be very transparent and very upfront with where's our supply, what do we need from customers? Please only use what you need, right? No matter what, don't ever waste the water. But we don't want to put a mandatory restriction in place until such time as you really need it. Longmont residents and community members are great. They are awesome. They respond when requested. They did it after the 2013 flood. I was amazed. And so I think keeping trust with the public on what we're doing, being transparent about what issues we're facing, and then trying to stay in sync as best we can regionally. I know that's a long answer, but
no, that was good.
It's a fairly complicated thing.
Yeah, and and I also like the idea of taking a proactive approach. So really, looking at different, as Councilmember Christensen had mentioned earlier, low water plants, just kind of changing our own yard space, landscaping that would prevent us from having to use a lot of water. So, just kind of getting ahead of it before we have to react. And so, I do like that idea that the caller, Bowman had talked about a rebate program, or, that's definitely something I'd like to explore a little more.
And if I could just real quick, Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring, the couple of things. You're probably going to see some budget requests coming from us to increase our water sustainability and conservation efforts. So I agree with you that we got to continually change up what we're doing in order to be effective. And so we're not in a crisis, right? But you can't wait until there's a crisis on you to act either. And so Harold doesn't know this yet, but we are going to be asking for some additional resources and effort in there. And we'll make the business case on why that's good for the city to come forward. But I don't disagree with the caller, with Ruby. I've known Ruby for years, and she always speaks from a position of knowledge and trust and truth. And so I don't disagree.
No, and it is wise to take more proactive approach rather than waiting for a crisis and then react, because that's what makes things difficult for a community. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Seeing no further discussion from City Council, I would like to move that City Council accepts the 2021-2022 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan.
Second.
All right, I moved it, and I believe that Councilmember Martin was the first voice I heard in my Zoom as a second. All those in favor of accepting the plan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Hearing 0 nays, the motion passes 6-0 with Mayor Bagley absent. Thank you so much. And we'll, I'm sure, see you soon because this seems to be a very important subject that we will continue to discuss. At this time, we'll continue to move right along in our agenda to legislative bills for consideration by City Council. I'd like to welcome Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I only have one bill for you today. This is Senate Bill 21-1289 concerning broadband deployment. This is a sweeping piece of legislation that creates the broadband office. It creates grants for communities to be able to bring additional fiber to different kinds of communities and really focuses also on student involvement and student opportunities for broadband. So we obviously support all things broadband, especially things that will help school children to be able to receive more higher speed broadband. So the staff recommends the City Council supports Senate Bill House Bill 21-1289.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Peck and then Councilmember Christensen next.
I move that we accept the staff's position on supporting 1289.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion to accept staff recommendation by Councilmember Peck and a second by Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring. Councilmember Christensen, you are up next in queue.
So never mind.
Okay. Nothing left to add. Any other questions or comments by council? All right. The motion on the table is to accept staff recommendation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Seeing and hearing no nays, the motion passes 6-0 with Mayor Brian Bagley absent. Thank you very much, Sam. Okay, so now we are getting to the end of our meeting here. We're moving on to item 7 in our agenda, which is mayor and council comments. I'd like to open that up for any council members. Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
I just wanted to remind any members of the public that the city is going to be flushing the drains in the last few weeks, and they're going to continue for a while. And some people are particularly sensitive to that. You might want to think about what you want to do. Anyway, I'm just reminding people of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Peck.
I was just wondering, do we have a last public invited to be heard at the study session? No. Thank you for the reminder.
All right, seeing no other hands in the air, I will just say quickly, please get your shot. Boulder County is doing a great job. The numbers are great in Boulder County versus a lot of other places in the country and in the state. And I understand people's hesitancy, but we have hundreds of millions of examples of the shot working. So just putting that out there versus maybe a few examples of some adverse reactions. But of course, talk to your physician and make the best choice for you, but please get the shot. Let's see here. City manager remarks. Harold, anything?
Mayor, council, we are having some challenges getting the retreat scheduled, and I know Sandy sent an email out. I'm going to ask her to resend that email to get it at the top of your email list, so we can try to pull that together. Council talked about being able to do it unmasked, and when we got into those dates, it's becoming pretty challenging. And so she will resend that email out to you one more time. So see if and when we can get everyone together. So if you'd please respond, we would appreciate it. And then we may be reaching out or discussing this at the next council meeting and city manager comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that I'm pretty sure I was the one that made that motion. and it was more about being in person more so than being maskless.
Right.
So I don't really mind if we're masked per se, but just putting that out there as a personal preference, but I know the email will go around.
Right.
All right. Eugene, anything?
Mayor and council, we are expecting a new mask order to come out of Boulder County Public Health tomorrow. So that might help inform not only the retreat, but other operations for the city. Other than that, no other comments.
All right, thank you. It does seem like there's just a few more comments from council, so I'll go with Councilmember Martin. I saw her hand up first, and then Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring.
Yeah, I just wondered, the council member and the council and the staff leadership at this point are all vaccinated. Is that not true?
I think so, but I'm not sure. So I think the answer is yes. I think part of it is literally now dates of when people are in town, when people aren't in town, and that's the challenge on getting everyone together.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring.
So, so it sounds like it's less about the mask issue and more about just coordinating dates. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, so we pushed to the mid-May and on
Okay.
because of the other issue. And then
Okay.
now from the mid-May on, it's hard to get folks. And it's almost looking like July 9th is probably the first day we're going to have to look
Okay.
at and getting everyone together.
Yeah.
But I wanted to
No.
let you all.
Okay, I just didn't want this to be the reason why we can't meet. You know, I'm a teacher. I have my mask on all day long. It's doable. We will survive. So I'd really hate to not have that opportunity for us to meet in person because of.
Yeah, that was my fault. I wanted to say that was kind of where we started the time.
Okay.
Now, once we started the time, it's hard to get folks together.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. With no further comments noticed at this time, I move adjournment.
Second.
Thank you. I have moved adjournment. Councilmember Peck has seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. All right. Seeing nobody opposed, the motion carries 6-0 with Mayor Brian Bagley absent. Thank you so much, everybody. See you next week.